approval of several of our administration's key initiatives, we are continuing to make strategic investments that move Chicago forward. We're expanding affordable housing and community development, strengthening our economy, improving public health, modernizing critical infrastructure, and creating more opportunity for working families across Chicago. I want to congratulate Dr. Garth Walker on his confirmation as Commissioner of the Chicago Department of Public Health. Commissioner Walker has spent his career improving health outcomes, advancing health equity, and strengthening chronic disease management, and tackling some of our nation's most pressing public health challenges. I look forward to continuing our work and that work that we would do together to expand access to healthcare and mental and behavioral health services, advancing health equity, and ensuring that every single Chicagoan has the opportunity to live longer and have a healthy life. I also want to congratulate Oswaldo Alvarez, Natasha Jenkins, Dennis Mondero, Dee Atkins, Lester Barclay, Dr. Michael Eady, and Christian Mariano Diaz-Lopez, and Karen Tamley on their confirmation to leadership positions across the Northern Illinois Transit Authority, the Chicago Transit Authority Board, the Metro Board, and the PACE Board. Building a stronger regional system starts with strong leadership. These appointments bring experienced public servants to our regional transit boards and reflect our commitment to building a system that is safer, more reliable, and a much better connected system for riders across the entire region. Investing in transit also means investing in the infrastructure that comes with a city like Chicago that is a world-class city. Today, City Council also approved important measures that will allow us to continue modernizing O'Hare and Midway, both of our airports. At O'Hare, Council approved up to $4.56 billion in new bonds to continue the airport's modernization, including the new Concourse D, which will expand service and help lower long-term operating costs. Through refinancing, this measure will enable us to save up to $113 million, reaffirming our commitment to investing in Chicago's infrastructure in our city and doing it responsibly and tactfully. At Midway, we secured approval for leases that will spur $150 million in private investment to modernize and upgrade our facilities, powering Midway's continued success while reaffirming Chicago's position as a global aviation hub. When the leases expire, these facilities will be transferred back to city ownership, ensuring the public enjoys the long-term benefits of these agreements. Together, these investments will strengthen Chicago's airports, support jobs, improve the travel experience, and reinforce our position as one of the world's leading transportation hubs. Council also advanced our work to build a cleaner, more sustainable transportation future by approving Chicago's first ever curbside electric vehicle charging pilot. This will expand access to EV charging, including for residents who rely on street parking and those living in multifamily housing. This is another step in our commitment to address climate change, build healthier communities, improve air quality, and ensure that every Chicagoan benefits from a cleaner, more modern transportation system. These investments come as Chicago continues to build on its momentum as a global destination. Last year, our city welcomed 56.8 million visitors, generating a record $21.5 billion in visitor spending and supporting more than 135,000 jobs across the region. Chicago's continued growth as a global destination is a clear reflection of the people who make this city extraordinary. It's our diversity, our neighborhoods, our culture, and the people who call Chicago home that make the city of Chicago unlike anywhere else in the world. And every visitor who chooses Chicago is investing in our communities, supporting local businesses, creating jobs, and helping the city thrive. As we welcome more people to experience Chicago, we are making investments that are necessary to ensure every neighborhood shares in our city's growth and opportunity. City Council approved a critical infrastructure investment, $425 million in TIF to support the 78. We also proposed $201.6 million for TIF infrastructure for Foundry Park. These investments will help transform long vacant sites by supporting public infrastructure, expanding housing opportunities, creating jobs, and bringing new economic investment to communities across Chicago. But building a stronger Chicago also means investing in the neighborhoods and residents who call our city home, including preserving affordable housing for our seniors and working families. I'm proud the City Council approved funding to preserve and rehabilitate senior housing at Levy House in Rogers Park and Villa Guadalupe in South Chicago, while also advancing efforts to preserve affordable housing at Heritage Woods and support the adaptive reuse of 135 South LaSalle. Finally, these measures will bring 110 much-needed affordable homes to our city while preserving these spaces. As we continue to confront the housing crisis head-on, my administration will continue to champion projects that provide Chicagoans with safe, stable, and affordable places to call home. Thank you all, and with that, I'm happy to answer your questions.
One question, one follow-up, please. Let's go down the line.
Hi, Mayor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hey. Your campaign ended the third quarter with just under $700,000. You took in about 100, spent about 290. You know, I know you don't have to have the most money to win a race, but if you do run for re-election, are you confident that you're going to be able to build out a full campaign, get your message out there, defend your record?
Well, look, every campaign that I ran, I won. So my confidence will always remain strong, but that confidence is really centered around the values that I hold to. The people of Chicago and Cook County supported my efforts to respond to the crises at hand, which is safety and affordability. And over the course of my time as the mayor of this city and as an elected official, I've demonstrated that our record is strong, right? We had the fewest amount of homicides last year in 60 years. We're building affordable units. We just invested $300 million for, 15 more projects for affordable housing. So that work is working, and we're going to continue to show for the people of Chicago because that's what they deserve.
Do you expect to make your announcement, whether or not you're running before, I think it's the July 28th is when you can start, candidates can start pulling petitions, right?
Yeah, look, I have not made, any, declaration or timeline around, when I'll make my intentions clear. What my primary focus has been is ensuring that I carry out the hopes and dreams and aspirations of working people. So far, the city of Chicago is moving in the right direction. More people are visiting our city, more cranes in the air. We've created more jobs. We've settled essentially every single contract that has crossed my desk. And again, though there's more work to be done, there were folks that tried to fearmonger and said that if you elect, Brandon Johnson as mayor of the city of Chicago, that, there will be a massive exodus in law enforcement, there'll be blood in the streets. None of that was true, right? In fact, we've actually proven that bold, progressive leadership that speaks to the needs of working people pays dividends. And so I'm going to continue to focus on that work. The people of Chicago elected me to build a safe and affordable city, and that's what I'm going to continue to focus my attention on.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
Just wanted to ask you about two issues that will be tabled until September, I believe, but that I think are on a lot of people's minds still. The parking meter deal for the city, just where you stand on that at this point, and then your renters' rights ordinance, and alders after the meeting spoke about their fair ordinance. Just your thoughts on those two things.
Yeah, well, look, obviously the parking meter deal, the worst of its kind ever in the history of municipal government. It's just an awful deal. Right now, the way the ordinance was structured many years ago, it places the responsibility and the authority in the hands of city council. So in terms of when they decide to take up this measure, as well as what else can be discussed and or negotiated, that authority lives in the hands of city council. As far as this other proposal around protecting renters, what I am encouraged by is that even corporatists in the interests of corporations, even they have now capitulated to what I've been calling for a very long time, and that's affordability, right? And so I think there's some clear indication there. The problem, though, is that from what I've viewed so far is that, two key measures that help protect renters are not submitted in their proposal. Getting rid of junk fees, just cause for eviction. The fact that, these individuals did not spend any time with residents or stakeholders, right? If you look at my proposal, this proposal is a reflection of, years and years and years of struggle. So to obfuscate or to circumvent collaboration, I believe that's derelict of duty, quite frankly. So, again, the key measures that would ultimately protect renters, I'm not seeing that in their proposal. Now, what they did do, though, is they took 98% of essentially of what I proposed, copied and pasted, but took out key components of what will protect renters. And I'm going to protect renters by any means necessary. And if you look at past prologue, when that same group took 98% of my budget and left out, less than 2%, you see the results. Right now, we're experiencing a $130 million shortfall because of that behavior. So, look, I'm going to continue to work with all stakeholders to ensure that working people in this city are protected. And I know that from my lived experience and from the experiences of many other people in this city, we need measures that are going to protect the renters. Over half of the city of Chicago are renters. What they have proposed comes dramatically short of what's needed in this moment. But at the very least, we'll consider this if I'm grading, I'll at least acknowledge the fact that they are now clear that affordability is the top issue in this country.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
You heard alders today, even some who were hesitant to vote yes for the TIF assistance for the 78, say that they were worried about not just phase one, but proposed future phases related Midwest doing that with the TIF assistance. So what guardrails exist to ensure that with this city investment, they actually follow through on their commitment to those future phases like the housing, the commercial, and that stuff? Well,
look, I mean, what we have done to unlock economic development in this city, one would consider that unprecedented, particularly in a short period of time. We're talking about sections of the city that have sat desolate for decades, right? And now we're unlocking these opportunities for jobs, for further commercial development, for housing. You cannot have a complete community without residents, right? And I believe the developers understand that. And as I said, there's no administration that has committed more to building affordable homes in this city. We look at what happened at the 1901 project. They made a commitment there, with TIF dollars to develop and build, but it also includes building more housing and making a commitment to affordability. Do I believe that we have to continue to work with the community to make sure that there are full benefits across the board? Of course, I'm going to continue to support that, and what's happening in Chicago right now, we just haven't seen in decades in this city, where development is happening and it's not coming at the expense of everyday working people. It's why we put together protective ordinances around Jackson Park is one good example, to protect those residents who are in proximity to the Obama Presidential Center. We get those concerns. Of course, I understand those concerns. I've organized in this city around those concerns. I'm the mayor of the city of Chicago because I made a commitment to addressing those concerns. So we're going to hold people accountable. But again, the good news is we're already seeing the breakout of the type of commercial development, large, big projects occurring, and affordability and housing is very much aligned in a part of that development.
One of the things that's come up is that there's no longer a CTA red line station contemplated for that site. Or do you think that future phases must include a new CTA red line station or bus stops in the conversation?
Well, I mean, look, the way the development has gone forward, there, were conversations around, how do we extend and create stronger pathways to expand public transportation. There's no secret between the work that we're doing, incentivizing development around public transportation, creating more express buses, Obviously, the red line extension, what we saw on the north side, we're going to cut the ribbon at the brand new green line stop in Austin, in my neighborhood. So we're obviously committed to public transportation, making it reliable, accessible, and safe. But again, as this development continues to take place, we got to keep in mind, let's look at the entire holistic approach to how we're addressing all of those concerns: housing, affordability, public transportation. I know this is grand. We have not had this type of bold leadership in a very long time in the city of Chicago. I'm grateful that we have interest from everyone, from affordability to public transportation to economic development to growing our economy. All that is happening simultaneously. That's a good thing for our city.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
First, I wanted to ask about the CPD superintendent search. Obviously, when you did this the last time around, Donald Trump wasn't president and there wasn't Operation Midway Blitz. Do you expect to make your directive for Chicago police to investigate federal agents a priority when interviewing the next round of finalists?
Well, look, there's no secret here that there's been some significant violation that has happened at the federal level. We just experienced more tragedy that we've seen in other parts of this country. And so the police department, along with advocates, have to come together to hold federal agents accountable, especially if they operate outside the confines of the law. Look, no one is above the law. The beauty of our democracy is intact when we actually hold to that value system. So of course I'm going to continue to make sure that I use every single tool available to me. Every single department has to play a part in keeping people safe and holding people accountable at the federal level when they act egregiously.
Thank you. And given that Keith Pettigrew has been serving in his role for a few months already, do you think it would be appropriate for the board to still remove him at this point?
Well, look, I think what's most appropriate would have been an open, transparent process. That didn't happen, right? In fact, I don't think it's a coincidence that we introduced, with the right process, names for the CHA board. And the moment we introduced those names, they were locked in rules. And then the very next month, this closed development occurred. The people of CHA, we're talking about over 130,000 residents. They deserve an open and transparent collaborative process, and they didn't get that. So today we put forth names of individuals that have over 100 years of experience. And when you think about what we need in this city in terms of affordability and housing, and public housing plays a critical role in helping us build the safest, most affordable big city in America. We cannot allow sort of the political games that are being played to get in the way of progress. I'm going to fight for working people in this city. That's why they elected me, is to fight for working people. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the very people who are more beholden to corporate interest and lobbyists who are quite avarice in their approach, right? They want it all. We're just simply saying there should be an equitable distribution of the largesse of this city, and working people deserve multiple pieces of the economic pie that we're creating in our city.
Mayor Johnson, the University of Chicago, one of the most prestigious universities in the city, in the country, really, just released a poll today stating that 60% of Chicagoans do not want you to run for re-election. I guess presumably don't want you to be mayor, period. I have to tell you, I have hundreds of thousands of real Chicagoans who have been reaching out to me personally over the course of the last year, essentially stating the exact same thing. They say that it's because of your approach to violent crime, specifically
Liam, let's get to
the way you handled the Sheridan Gorman case. On the day that Sheridan Gorman's parents came to Chicago to retrieve her body, you told jokes about abolishing ICE. You named an ICE plow Abolish ICE. You laughed, you smiled, you giggled.
William, do you have a question to
Yes,
ask?
many
Let's
Chicagoans
please get to
said
the
that
question.
was despicable. It was below the dignity of the office of mayor. It was below the dignity of really the United States of America, a big city mayor.
William, I believe your question is
At
about
this
the polling.
point, do you
Is that
have
correct?
even two decent words that you can cobble together to say apologize to the parents of Sheridan Gorman?
Well, look, as I said before, you know, every act of violence in this city is horrific. And, you know, we will continue to do everything in our power to keep the people of this city safe. Look, one act of violence is one too many. It is my top priority. And I will continue to do everything that I can to create safe and affordable communities, right? And as much as we grieve for the loss of life and all of the lives that have been lost because of the senseless acts of violence.
Can you even say her name?
The larger point is that we do have a real issue with illegal weapons in the city of Chicago and across America. The federal government has to do a better job partnering with municipalities. They
You
do.
don't seem to want to say the name Sheridan Gorman.
I believe you asked your follow-up question, William.
The follow-up question, it has to do with law enforcement. Police Superintendent Snelling retired today. Hundreds of thousands of real Chicagoans, again, tell me that Superintendent Snelling was the only bright light in your administration. Will your next superintendent appointee have to follow your anti-police philosophies that law enforcement is a sickness, a quote sickness, that incarcerating repeat violent offenders like?
All right, thank you for the
first
question,
of all,
William. Thank
listen,
you.
I got your question, William. So no, I'm not anti-police, and I've been very clear about that. And William, you can't talk over me. William, you can't talk over me. All right, I'm responding to your question. Well, listen, okay, all right, let's move on. Thank you. I've already answered your question. In fact, the way you are conducting yourself right now, though you're accusing me of being anti-police, your behavior is anti-black. Knock it off. Next question, please. Mark, please answer your question.
Okay. First of all, good evening.
Good evening.
And how do you answer the allegations that your currently stalled appointees for the Chicago Housing Authority Board of Commissioners amount to flying monkeys who are primed to replace Keith Pettigrew as CEO with another executive flying monkey of your choice?
Well, first of all, Mark, I don't, appreciate the name calling. I don't know if you're just doing that in jest, but I don't want to refer to anybody as a flying monkey.
That's not name calling. That's clinical psychological terminology.
There's a clinical psychological term for flying monkeys?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well,
derived from the Wizard of Oz.
Do you have a follow-up question?
okay. Well, I think the point being is, what's the motivation behind appointing people to the CHA board? I want to make this point really clear. And Mark, check this out. Every mayor has appointed members to the CHA board. Every mayor has done that. That there's a precedent that's been established. And here's the point, though. The individuals that we put forward have over 100 years of experience doing the work that's going to help the 130,000 residents who rely upon public housing. That's the focus here. Right? Look, I get it that there are individuals that are using, these positions for their own sort of political aspirations, right? That's Chicago, that's politics, but it's not right for the people of Chicago. That's the point. And my focus is always going to be on protecting renters, protecting workers, protecting working people in this city. That's why I've invested billions of dollars. We've invested, Mark, over $2 billion on the west side alone. $2.6 billion on the south side, $1.9 billion downtown for economic development and neighborhood expansion. That's the work that's working. You can't sleep on the fact that more people are visiting our city. You can't sleep on the fact that we are safer than when I started this position. You can't sleep on the fact that we've been able to have the most pro-worker agenda that this city has experienced in decades, if not forever, right? More money in our public education system. More money in building affordable housing. We have reopened mental health clinics. There is no other mayor in modern history in this city that can say that their goal was to build safe and affordable communities and not at the expense of everyday people, and they were actually able to accomplish that. We've accomplished that. And so these appointments, like every other mayor before me, are designed to make sure that we're centering our work around working people. That's my focus, and that's where it will remain.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, well, I have a follow.
Go ahead, you get your follow-up.
Follow-up, yeah. So since this is the last month for the City Reparations Task Force to conduct meetings and issue a harms report in conjunction with the NAACP convention, planning a panel next week with members of the State Reparations Commission. And as Yusef Jackson says as of Sunday that he's ready to get on board with reparations, how will your administration coordinate with Rainbow Bush Coalition and the NAACP on repair for U.S. chattel slave descendants?
That's a great question. And, you know, I don't know if you are aware, but, you know, a couple of weeks ago, as a part of our reparations effort, we finally made good on the promise that I made, other administrations made, but they didn't keep it, to help support victims who were tortured by John Burge. And we broke ground on the south side of Chicago for this memorial that will be a educational space to make sure that we are building a government that doesn't torture people, right? And that was important. Other administrations said that they would support it. They didn't, but I did. Moving forward, we're going to need these civil rights organizations to help us not just process and unpack the recommendations, but to carry them out. You know, 400 years of torture and torment. It's going to take time to repair that damage. Now, we've already started that process, whether it's in our hiring for young people, the Black Student Success Program, the investments that we're making on the west and south sides of Chicago. So this task force is not necessarily the start of us repairing the harm. It's going to be part of the culmination, and that includes working with our historic, traditional civil rights organizations. I think repair is the investments. The reconciliation is the acknowledgement of the harm, and we've done both.
Thank you, Mark.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
DPS released their budget proposal, which would furlough teachers for 5 days and lay off 760 teachers. Superintendent Macklin King said there's no way to balance the budget without impacting the classroom. Do you think that's the right plan for Chicago's students?
Well, that's a disappointment. No, it's not the right approach, right? But this is, you know, really the result of Springfield not coming through on its promise, right? They made a commitment per law that they would fully fund our schools across the state, and they haven't done it. And, you know, I think it's incumbent upon, you know, the General Assembly as well as the governor to work with the Board of Education, especially as they become fully elected, and work with the superintendent to address the funding gap that we have in our city. Now, look, I have used every single tool available to me. There's no mayor that has released more funding into our public schools than my administration. And that doesn't address the structural challenges that we have. And this idea or notion that the way to balance budgets is off the backs of working people and at the expense of our students, that's not sustainable, and I believe it's unhealthy. And so I'm calling on my state partners to work with City Council, to work with our Board of Education, to work with our labor partners, right? Whether it's CTU, SEIU, all of their members will be impacted. The state has to do its part to increase the funding for our public schools. You know, otherwise, our workers and our children are going to suffer.
I reported that the law department told the federal judge overseeing the consent decree that the city had spent $259 million to resolve lawsuits alleging police misconduct in 2025. Only $133 million of that was attributed to the police department's budget. Why wasn't that entire amount sort of counted as part of what the Chicago Police Department spent?
That's a good question, Heather. You know, honestly, I would have to dig into it a little bit more. I do know that because our budgets are restrained, that we've had to, over the last year or so, we've had to finance to be able to respond to these settlements. And unfortunately, many of these settlements go back 10 years and sometimes even longer. The encouraging news is that constitutional policing has improved, but we still have a long way to go. But you know, I'm offering up the perspective, but I'm happy to get, you know, a more pointed response. But I believe it had more to do with not just the restraint that we had, but within our budgets, but the fact that we've had to finance in order to deal with these lawsuits and these settlements. Look, between these settlements and, you know, pension payments that have just gone ignored for at least 30 years conservatively, that's what has strained our budget. Now, we saw with the latest reporting, every single revenue stream that I proposed that's overperforming. We ended with a surplus at the end of 2025. There's more work to be done around how we stabilize our budget. But again, that pressure from pensions as well as police settlements have been quite severe. Thank you.
Hey, Mayor.
Hi.
On the renters ordinances, with this new plan from Alderman opposed to you, will you fight their plan, or do you view it as an acceptable compromise? And would you rather see these protections pass or nothing pass?
Well, I mean, of course, I want to see renters protected. That's the goal, right? It's not just about doing something. That's been the kind of the regular practice in government, where we just do something to get it out of the way. Don't treat the people of Chicago like a side chick. Don't do that. We have to prioritize working families in this city. And the best way to do that is to protect the individuals that make up the majority of our city. And those are our renters.
And today you introduced another referendum question calling for a 3% tax on millionaires. Are you prepared to try to get the legislative changes needed to actually implement that tax? Why is this something you're trying again after Alderman struck it down last week?
Well, look, just because you have some corporate aligned alders that are resistant to the needs of working people, that doesn't mean you give up the fight for working people, right? You know, if we were to take that and accept that as a form of governance, you know, this room would not look as diverse as it does. I mean, look, I'm not the first leader to propose bold transformational ideas, and then you have a handful of aligned corporatists that want to prevent that progress from happening. This is not about just doing something or doing anything. It's about standing up for working people, right? And so, of course, I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure that we have a revenue stream that the people of Chicago want, a revenue stream that's going to help us with our schools, as your colleague asked about. It's going to help us continue to invest in mental and behavioral health care. It's going to help us build more affordable housing. These investments are literally saving people's lives. And so I'm always going to fight to make sure that we're saving lives. And here's the thing. When you talk to everyday people in this city, whether they are high earners or low wage earners, they know that our revenue streams and the way we attract revenue is unfair. That's why we were able to effectively pass the social media amusement responsibility tax. And then the state of Illinois followed our lead. The economy is shifting, and we have to shift with it. We have to go where the revenue is in order to make sure that our infrastructure is secure, that we're responding to, again, to healthcare needs, closing the life expectancy gap, investing in our public education system, creating more jobs, investing in our transportation system. These revenues are not just so that we can just check off a box and say, because we passed it, we're progressive. This is about making sure that we're making the critical investments to build the safest, most affordable big city in America. And here's the real danger if we don't do it. And people talk about New York a lot, which I get it to some extent. The average price of a home in New York is $1.1 million. Now, I know they're working hard to address it. The average price of a home in Los Angeles is $900,000. And I know they're working hard to address it. We're still in the position where we can create affordable spaces and create safe spaces at the same time. And so, you know, even some of the colleagues who may not agree with my question have raised the same proposal in previous iterations, right? So, you know, my question to them is, do you support taxing the rich or not? Do you support challenging those with means to put more skin in the game? Or are you going to try to balance budgets off the backs of working people like they tried to do in last year's budget, and now we're short $130 million? That way fails. What we're proposing works. So let's do what works. Tax the rich.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
Good afternoon.
When it comes to removing toxic lead lines from people's homes, Chicago charges homeowners and taxpayers more than 3 times more than New York City, more than 3 times more than Elgin, twice as much as Evanston. Given that the funds for this are finite, that means 2/3 of kids, daycare centers in Chicago, will still have leaded water, will have their brains exposed to that. Isn't it worth the city looking into bringing that price, that per lead line price down? The last time we spoke, you said that wasn't something you were looking into.
No, that's actually not accurate.
Okay, if you'd like to change.
Yeah, no,
your-
I said, because you've asked this before. I never said we're
Or
not going to look into
You said finding outside funding. You did not say bringing down the actual price charged per lead line.
Okay, listen.
If that's different, I'd love to hear.
Okay, well, first of all, we've already made some critical investments removing, these lead service lines. We're talking about decades upon decades of, this system being the way it's been. The fact that we are addressing it, we're the first administration to do it in a real way, right? And so here's the larger point, though. We've already started, especially with our daycares, removing those lead service lines out. Again, every city is different. To just simply make those comparisons without the full scope of everything from, as I said in our last question, when you asked us the last time, we have utilities that are underground, right? There are additional steps that we could be taking that other cities do not, right? Of course, we will want to do it in a way where it doesn't cost as much, of course, but it's not something that is automatic just simply because, the costs are what they are. But just know that I am focused on removing these lead service lines. We obviously need more money from the federal level as we continue to deal with the structural challenges that we have as a city. That's why we're pushing for more progressive revenue to address these infrastructure needs. Now, the more revenue we get, particularly from those who have the means to pay, that will impact costs. Just like when we build more affordable homes, it brings down the cost of housing. And so, of course, all of these things are connected. But this notion that somehow I'm not committed to having cost savings as it relates to dealing with, decades of malfeasance, that's not an accurate depiction of how I responded. Respectfully.
So you are working on bringing down the per
I think we're
line
working.
cost.
Of course, we're working on making things more affordable. Of
Okay,
course,
that's
we're
that's
making
not the
on things.
question. The question is, we pay an average of
Okay,
$35,000
I've
per
heard your
line.
question, so let me just
Are you
repeat it
working
one
on
more
bringing
time.
that down,
Of
that
course,
line
we're
cost?
working on making things less. As I said, as we build more revenue, as we actually have more
But
resources.
bringing more revenue in, I'm talking about the per line cost.
Yes. Yes.
And how?
You just said, let's not talk about the revenue, and then you asked me how.
No, how?
I
No,
don't-
okay, I just want to be super clear. Will you work on bringing down the
We are
cost?
doing
What
that.
people charge the city?
We are doing that.
Thank you, Monica.
We are
Let's
doing
move on
that.
to Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
This isn't one of my questions, but Spain or Argentina in the World Cup?
Well, let me just say I'm a big Eastern Illinois fan. That's where my son will be playing. He is one of only 4 American players on that team, so I'm very proud of him. Eastern Illinois versus Chicago State, September 16th. There's no guarantee that my son will be on the field, but we certainly will be there to cheer him on.
So I'm sorry, I don't know a lot about soccer. I'm just asking like Spain or Argentina. I don't know what that means.
Well, the next time you ask a question and you don't know much about it, maybe I won't make this count as your initial question. I'm saying that I'm focused on Eastern Illinois. Go
Okay,
Panthers.
gotcha. On the CPS budget, do you foresee needing to issue another record TIF surplus in order to help CPS with this budget and avoid, the type of cuts pitched today? And do projects like the 78 make that harder to do this year?
Well, look, there's no administration that has given more TIF dollars to our schools. Record levels of TIF, right? So my record speaks for itself. And here's a way in which I'm talking about it. Who has the sole and the larger responsibility to fund our schools? You know who that is, right? It's the state of Illinois. The state of Illinois, $1.6 billion. One-time influx of revenue towards our schools, it's not a sustainable way to fund our system. It's just not. Now, look, we have a couple of options here. You know, we can claim to be good Democrats and then fall short of standing up for working people like we've done in multiple elections, and that's why right-wing extremism is prevailing. Or we can actually do the things that are necessary to stand up for working people. Which is it? I'm gonna do my part, right? You don't ever have to worry about Mayor Johnson doing his part to invest in our public education system. We need the state of Illinois to take up in earnest a pathway to generate progressive revenue to make sure that poor children, working children, black and brown children, immigrants, undocumented children, special education children, children with special needs, children who need transportation to get to and from. We have to demand that Democrats stand up and lead in this moment. We have to stop making excuses of why we cannot. Now, look, again, the largest TIF surplus in the history of Chicago. I'm always going to put skin in the game when it comes to standing up for working people. But you and I both know, all of us in this room, this entire state knows that that is not a sustainable way to build a school district or school districts that we can be proud of. 70% of the people of this state have made it very clear that they support progressive revenue to fund our public education systems across the state. Let's do it. I mean, think about how proud of a moment this would be for the country if the state of Illinois is leading the charge to invest in public education, particularly at a time when we had Race to the Top that failed, No Child Left Behind that failed, school closures, privatization, all of that has failed. Every single neighborhood that had a school that closed, violence is higher in those communities. So check this out. Let's get this right. If we fund our schools to full capacity, not only do we improve educational outcomes, not only do we protect workers, but we get to save lives. That's a win-win-win for everyone. Saving lives, protecting workers, and making sure that our children have every single skill that they need to be successful. Isn't that worth investing in? I'm gonna do my part. I need everyone to rally around our call to fully fund our public education system and do right by working people across the city and this state.
And then would you veto any of the referendum questions that passed today to make room for any of your questions?
I don't believe that
millionaires?
parliamentary, that those are resolutions. I don't believe we can even veto those. No, right.
Last question. Let's bring it back to the parking meters. Aldermen have hit a standstill here. They don't know what to do. Maybe your opinion, they need some guidance from you. Should they accept or reject the sale of the parking meters?
Well, look, they have to do their due diligence because that's what the law requires them to do. Now, I appreciate the inventiveness of Chairman Irvin and his approach, but it is their authority. It is their authority. And I think that there's an opportunity for the city council to, exert or maybe even assert, a thorough, thoughtful process, but that is their responsibility and their authority, and I fully expect them to do their part. That's it? Oh, man, great. Thank you all. It would have been nice to see the U.S. in the World Cup. Does that help?